Audrey Vance dragged the squeegee across the window in one long, practiced pull. The glass went from foggy to clear, and the city snapped into focus on the other side. A corner office, warm gold light, a wide mahogany desk, and her husband, kissing another woman. Audrey's hand stopped mid-pull. She knew that shoulder. She'd ironed that shirt. She knew the exact way Jack tilted his head, because for 9 years he'd tilted it that way toward her. Except the woman in his arms wasn't her. The woman in his arms had long dark waves and a red dress and manicured hands sliding up the back of Jack's neck like she'd done it 100 times before. This wasn't a slip. It wasn't drunk. It wasn't a mistake. It was comfortable. "No," Audrey whispered, fogging the glass she'd just cleaned. "No, no, no." She wiped it again. She needed it clearer. She needed it to be a lie. It got clearer, and it got worse. Because Jack reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. Even through the glass, Audrey could read the handwriting on the front. Her own handwriting, block letters, 3 words she'd written on that envelope herself. NIA'S Treatment Fund. The money for their daughter's medicine. The money Audrey had bled for. The money she skipped lunch for, took double shifts for, sold her mother's gold chain for. Jack handed it to the woman in red, and the woman smiled. Audrey's whole body went cold. She pressed her gloved hand flat against the window, as if she could reach through 800 feet of air and rip that envelope back. Jack said something. Audrey couldn't hear it. But she'd read enough of his lips over 9 years to catch it. She won't know. She won't know. Audrey's fingers curled around the squeegee so tight the rubber squealed. And then Jack turned his head, toward the window, toward her. For one horrible second, Audrey was sure he'd seen her. That their eyes would meet through the glass and the whole world would crack open. But he hadn't seen her. Window cleaners are invisible. He was just checking his reflection. He fixed his tie in the glass where his wife's tears were sliding down the other side, and then he pulled the woman in red closer. That was when Audrey felt the platform lurch, a hard, wrong jerk, metal groaning above her. Her stomach dropped as one side of the rig dipped, and her boot slid off the edge into open sky. The safety rope snapped taut, then slipped. Audrey grabbed for the cable with both hands, and she fell. Before I tell you how Audrey Vance ended up dangling from a fraying rope 60 floors above the street, with her husband's betrayal on the other side of the glass, you need to understand what she sacrificed to keep that man standing. Because the woman falling wasn't weak. She was the strongest person in that entire building. And the 2 men whose lives were about to collide over her, neither one of them knew it yet. Real quick, before your heart climbs all the way back down from that ledge, if you've ever poured everything you had into somebody who was quietly emptying you out, do me one small thing. Tap that subscribe button and type the word invisible in the comments. Because that's how the world treats women like Audrey. Like they don't see her. By the end of this story, I promise you, everybody sees her. Okay, deep breath. Let's go back to the beginning. Rewind one day. 5 in the morning. The apartment was dark, cold, quiet. The good kind of quiet. The kind that belongs only to the person who wakes up first. Audrey moved through it without turning on the lights. She didn't need them. She knew this kitchen the way you know a song you've sung 1,000 times. 2 eggs, soft, that was for Nia. A banana cut into coins, because Nia said whole bananas were too aggressive. A little glass of orange juice, no pulp, because pulp was, in Nia's professional 7-year-old opinion, a betrayal. Then the pills. Audrey lined them up on the counter. The pink one, the 2 white ones. The capsule that cost more than everything else on the counter combined. She counted them twice. She always counted twice. Then she opened her banking app. The number that came up made her stomach tighten. She stared at it a second too long, then did what she always did. She moved a small amount, whatever she could spare, into the account labeled NIA, treatment. It wasn't much. It was never much. But it was something. And something was the whole religion Audrey lived by. She closed the app before the number could look at her any longer. Behind her, down the hall, Jack was still asleep. She could hear him breathing. Audrey walked to the bedroom door and looked at him. Her husband. His face soft in sleep, one arm thrown over her empty side of the bed. And here's the part that matters. Here's the part that makes all of it hurt. She still loved him. She leaned in, and she kissed his forehead, gentle, so she wouldn't wake him. "Get some rest," she whispered. "One of us should." Then she went to make his lunch. You should know who they used to be. Because Audrey didn't marry a rich man. She married a broke one. 11 years ago, Jack was a kid with big dreams and empty pockets, and Audrey was the girl working 2 jobs who believed in him hard enough for the both of them. She paid his exam fees the semester he couldn't. She sold a ring her grandmother left her so he could keep his apartment. She worked a double the night before his big interview so he'd have a suit that fit. She still remembered the night the lights got shut off, their first winter together. No heat. She'd come home from her second shift to find Jack sitting in the dark in his coat, humiliated, unable to look at her. "I'm sorry," he'd said. "I'm gonna fix it. I swear I'm gonna fix it." And Audrey, 22 years old, exhausted, freezing, had climbed into his lap, wrapped a blanket around both of them, and said, "We don't need lights, baby. I can see you just fine." He'd cried that night. Actually cried, into her shoulder, and told her nobody had ever believed in him like she did. And one night, she never forgot this, Jack held her face in both hands and said, "One day, Audrey, I swear to you, one day you're never gonna have to work this hard again. I'm gonna take care of you the way you take care of me." She believed him. That's the thing nobody tells you about betrayal. It doesn't hurt because you were foolish. It hurts because you were right to hope. You just picked the wrong person to hope in. And the cruelest math of all? The colder Jack got, the harder Audrey loved. Because some part of her kept thinking if she just gave a little more, worked a little harder, she could get back to that boy in the dark who cried into her shoulder. She didn't know yet that boy was already gone. Maybe he'd never really been there at all. That afternoon, before her shift, Audrey went to the hospital. Nia was sitting up in bed with a crayon in one hand and a look of deep concentration, and she did not even glance up when her mother walked in. "Don't talk to me," Nia said. "I'm in my art era." Audrey pressed her lips together to keep from laughing. "My apologies. Should I come back?" "No, you can stay." But quietly. Nia held up the drawing. 2 stick figures and a blob. "It's us. That's you. That's me. That's a dog. We don't have a dog. That's why it's art, Mommy. It's aspirational." Audrey laughed for real then, sat on the edge of the bed, and tucked a braid behind her daughter's ear. Nia was small for 7, too small, with dark eyes that took up half her face and a tube taped to the back of her hand. But she was funny. She'd been funny since she could talk. Audrey didn't know where she got it. Certainly not from Jack. "Mommy," Nia said, quieter now, coloring. "When I'm all better. Can we go somewhere pretty? Anywhere you want, baby. Korea?" Audrey blinked. Okay, that's very specific. I saw it on TV. There's a place with lanterns on the water. And the food looks so good, Mommy. They have these little pancakes." Nia gasped at the memory of the little pancakes. "We're going. It's decided." "Then it's decided," Audrey said. And meant it, God help her. Meant it with a bank account that couldn't buy a bus ticket. Nia went back to coloring. Then, without looking up, "Is Daddy coming?" And Audrey paused. Just for a second. Just a breath. "Of course he is," she said. But it was the pause that told the truth. And somewhere deep down, in the place children keep the things they're too smart to say out loud, Nia heard it. Now, the rope. Because Audrey didn't fall to the street. If she had, there'd be no story. She fell 4 feet and slammed into the secondary line, the backup rope every rig is supposed to have, and it caught her, and she swung there against the glass, 60 floors up, heart hammering, hands screaming, staring at the frayed end of the main line whipping in the wind above her. Frayed. Not snapped. Not worn, cut frayed, clean on one side, but Audrey didn't have the luxury of thinking about that yet. She had the luxury of not dying, so she climbed. Hand over hand, boots scrabbling, up onto the rig, and she lay on that metal platform gasping while the city spun below her, alive, so stupidly alive. Her coworker Reggie hauled the rig up from the roof, and when he saw her face he went white. Audrey. What happened? Your line." "I'm fine." "You are not fine, you almost..." "Reggie." She grabbed his sleeve. Her hand was shaking so hard she could barely hold it. "I'm fine." 2 words. The biggest lie she'd tell all week, and not the last time she'd tell it. Reggie sat back on his heels, breathing hard, and looked at her like she'd lost her mind. Reggie was a good man, 61 years old, 3 grandkids, and a running commentary on the state of the world that could get Audrey through the worst shift. "You know what you are," he said. "You're one of those people who'd get hit by a bus and apologize to the bus. The bus should apologize. I had the light. See, that's... No. You're proving my point." He shook his head, but his eyes were worried. "Audrey, that line didn't just wear out. I check that gear every morning." "I checked it this morning." Audrey looked at the frayed rope, whipping gently now in the wind, clean on one edge. I know, she said quietly. I know you did. Neither of them said the next part out loud, but it sat there between them, cold as the wind. She didn't confront Jack. You'd think she would. You'd think she'd storm home and burn the place down. But Audrey wasn't built for storming. Audrey was built for surviving. And two thoughts were louder than her rage. I need proof. And Nia's next payment is due Friday. So she came home that night, and she found Jack already there, on the couch, scrolling his phone. He looked up and smiled. That easy, handsome, lying smile. Hey, long day? He got up. He crossed the room. He kissed her forehead, the exact spot she'd kissed his that morning, with the exact same lips she'd watched kiss another woman through a pane of glass. Audrey's whole body wanted to recoil. She held perfectly still. Yeah, she said. Long day. You okay? You look tired. She looked at him, at his mouth, at his kind, warm, empty eyes. I'm fine. And Jack, satisfied, went back to his phone. Because a man who stopped looking at you never notices when you stop looking back. Friday, the payment bounced. Audrey stood in the hospital billing office and watched the woman behind the desk frown at her screen and say the words that stopped Audrey's heart. Ma'am, this account's been drawn down. There's not enough to cover the treatment. That's not possible. I put money in every week. There've been withdrawals. Several. I can print. No. Audrey's voice cracked. No. There's a mistake. She stepped into the hallway and called Jack. He picked up on the fourth ring, distracted. Where's Nia's money, Jack? A pause. I moved it. You moved it. Temporarily, it's fine. It's an investment thing. I'm handling our finances. I'm trying to actually fix our situation instead of just bleeding money into a hospital every month. You invested our daughter's medicine. See, this is what you do. His voice sharpened, flipping it, the way he always flipped it. You panic. You catastrophize. You've never understood money, Audrey. That's why we're broke. You just throw it at problems instead of... And there it was. Somehow, standing in a hospital hallway with her daughter's treatment unpaid, Audrey ended the call feeling like she was the irresponsible one. That's the trick, isn't it? That's how they keep you. They rob you and hand you the guilt like it's your receipt. The proof came from a coat pocket. Audrey was doing laundry, because of course she was still doing his laundry. And a receipt fell out of Jack's blazer. A restaurant. The kind with one name and no prices on the website. 2 entrees. A bottle of wine that cost more than Nia's copay. Table for 2. Audrey looked up the place, strolled their tagged photos, some sick instinct dragging her thumb down the screen, and there it was, Jack, laughing. A woman leaning into him, glass raised. Long dark waves. Red dress. The woman from the window. Audrey sat down on the laundry room floor and didn't move for a long time. This wasn't a night. This wasn't a slip. This was a life. A whole second life. And she'd been funding it. So Audrey did something Audrey had never done. She followed him. She told Reggie she was sick. She sat in her beat-up car outside Jack's office and she watched her husband come out at lunch, get into a car she'd never seen, sleek, black, new, and drive to a part of the city she couldn't afford to park in. And over 3 days, piece by piece, she built the picture. The car was leased in Jack's name, so was a storage unit, so was... Audrey's hands went numb when she found this. An apartment. A nice one. Doorman and everything. She stood across the street and watched the woman in red walk in like she owned it, because on paper, half of it, she did. Hotels. Dinners. A watch. A weekend in wine country Audrey had thought was a work conference. On the 3rd day, she almost got caught. Jack came out of that doorman building earlier than she expected, right as she was crossing the street, and for one heart-stopping second his eyes swept in her direction. Audrey did the only thing she could think of. She turned to a shop window and froze, watching his reflection in the glass. He didn't see her. Of course he didn't. He never really looked at her anymore, not even when she was standing 10 feet away. His eyes passed right over his own wife like she was part of the sidewalk, and Audrey stood there staring at her reflection layered over the mannequins and thought, I've been invisible to this man for a year, and I called it peace. Months. It had been going on for months. And every dollar of it, every single dollar, had a twin. For every steak Jack bought that woman, Audrey had skipped a meal. For every gift, she'd taken a shift. She'd been starving quietly in one part of the city, so he could feast loudly in another. The final piece she found by accident. Jack left his tablet on the counter, logged in, and his messages were mirrored to it, and Audrey, who had never once snooped in 9 years, picked it up with shaking hands. Delilah, Did you tell her about the apartment yet? Jack, not yet. Delilah, you're still wearing her ring, you know. I saw it at dinner. Jack, she'll get over it, she always does. She'll get over it, she always does. Audrey set the tablet down, carefully. Like it was made of glass. Like everything in her life was made of glass now. One wrong move from shattering. She looked at her left hand. At the thin gold band she'd worn for 9 years, she slid it off, she set it on the counter, and then... Down the hall, a small voice. Mommy, can I have water? Mia, awake, needing her. And Audrey, this is the part I need you to really sit with. Audrey picked the ring back up, and she put it back on. And she wiped her face with the heel of her hand and made her voice sunshine and said, Coming, baby. Because she could not afford to fall apart. Falling apart is a thing you do when someone's there to catch you. Audrey had a sick little girl and an empty account and no one in the whole world to catch her. So she carried the water down the hall with a steady hand and a breaking heart, and she smiled, and she said, Drink up, my love, and she did not cry. That's not weakness. That's the strongest thing a human being can do. A week later, Jack invited her to dinner. Someplace nice, he said, adjusting his collar in the mirror. We haven't done that in forever. Let's, I don't know, reconnect. And God, the worst part? A little flicker of hope lit up in Audrey's chest. Even then, even knowing, some tiny, exhausted, loyal part of her thought, maybe he's ending it. Maybe he's choosing us. That's what betrayal does. It doesn't just break your heart, it makes you ashamed of your own hope. She wore her one good dress. She did her braids up nice. The long ones with the little coiled rosettes she saved for special occasions. She looked, and she knew she looked, beautiful. The restaurant was all low light and soft music. And when the host walked her to the table, there were 3 chairs, and in one of them sat the woman in the red dress. Audrey, Jack said, smooth as ice. This is Delilah, a business associate. Delilah, my wife. My wife. Like a footnote. Delilah stood, extended a hand, smile like a knife wrapped in silk. It's so lovely to finally meet you. Jack talks about you all the time. Audrey shook her hand. She had to. There were other people at the table now. Some of Jack's work friends. A couple Audrey half knew. And Audrey did the math in 1 second flat. He set this up. He wanted an audience. He wanted to watch me squirm in front of people. So Audrey sat down, and she smiled. And she picked up her menu with a hand that did not shake, because she had held a fraying rope 60 floors up and she was done letting her hands shake for this man. Delilah leaned over, all warmth. I have to say, I just admire you so much. Working way up on those buildings? In that little jumpsuit? All that gear? I could never. You're so brave. A couple people chuckled. Somebody's gotta clean the glass you people smudge, Audrey said pleasantly, and buttered a roll. The chuckle changed. Now it was with her. Just slightly. And Delilah's smile tightened a millimeter. I love that for you, Delilah recovered, sipping her wine. The confidence. Truly. Jack tells me you're so low maintenance. Which must make things easy for him. Low maintenance. Audrey nodded slowly. That's a fun way to say I've never asked him for a single thing. A man across the table, one of Jack's colleagues, laughed before he could stop himself, then covered it with a cough. Delilah's eyes flicked to him, then back. Well, some of us just have different standards. Some of us just have different bank accounts, Audrey said sweetly. Funny how that works out. You should ask Jack where the difference comes from. For one dangerous second, the table went quiet, and Delilah's mask slipped just enough for Audrey to see the calculation behind it. The woman knew exactly where the money came from. She'd known all along. But Jack, oblivious, swirled his wine and delivered the line. The one that would sit in Audrey's chest like a stone. Audrey doesn't know what to do with herself when she's not struggling, he said, laughing, to the whole table. It's kind of her thing. She wouldn't know how to live without it. And a few of them laughed. At her. The woman who'd sold her grandmother's ring so this man could keep his lights on. Audrey looked at her husband, laughing at her over a bottle of wine he'd bought with their daughter's medicine, and something in her went very quiet. Not broken. Quiet. Like the ocean pulling back from the shore right before the wave. She set down her butter knife. Excuse me, she said. I need some air. Outside, the night was cool. Audrey sat on a bench by the valet stand and breathed like she was teaching her own lungs how to do it. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't march back in and flip the table, though Lord knows a jury of women would have acquitted her. She took out her phone. Now, remember the rope? The frayed rope, cut clean on one side? After that incident, when Audrey had filed the report nobody read, a stranger had approached her in the building lobby. A quiet, sharp-eyed man in a dark suit who said very little and handed her a plain black business card with nothing on it but a phone number. If you ever feel unsafe, he'd said, you call this, any hour. Audrey had thought it was bizarre. She'd almost thrown it away. Something made her keep it, tucked in the back of her phone case, the way you keep a key to a door you don't know yet. She pulled it out now. She thought about the rope, cut clean on one side. She thought about the apartment in Jack's name and the will she'd signed years ago, and the way a woman who dies in a workplace accident leaves behind a very tidy insurance policy and a husband free to start over. She thought, what if the money wasn't the plan? What if I was in the way of the plan? And she typed one sentence. I think someone is trying to kill me. She stared at it. She hit send. Across the city, in a room high above the water, a phone lit up on a table. A man picked it up. Read it. And though nothing in his face moved, not a muscle, not a breath, the temperature of the whole room seemed to change. The man beside him noticed. Boss? Gi-ha set the phone down. Find her, he said. Let me tell you about the man who got that text. In this city, there were people with money and people with power, and then there was Gi-ha, who was a different kind of thing entirely, the kind of name people lowered their voice to say, if they said it at all. He was 35. Dark brown hair swept back off a face that belonged on a movie poster, a jaw you could cut glass on, and eyes that were the first thing anyone noticed and the last thing they forgot. Steady, unhurried, dangerous eyes that seemed to already know how the conversation was going to end. He didn't wear suits when he didn't have to. Tonight it was a fitted olive green tee, stretched over a boxer's build, a worn brown belt, tan cargo pants, a heavy gold watch, and running down both forearms, dark tattoos he never explained to anyone. He didn't raise his voice. He'd never had to. Gi-ha could quiet a room just by walking into it. And here's what nobody expected about a man like that. When the text came in from a window cleaner he'd met exactly once, he didn't send a lackey. He went himself. He found her at the hospital. Because of course that's where she was. She'd left the dinner and gone straight to Nia, the way she went to Nia the way other people go to church. Audrey was sitting in a plastic chair outside her daughter's room, still in her one good dress, elbows on her knees, staring at the floor like it owed her money. Gi-ha didn't announce himself. He just sat down, one chair away, not close, not looming. For a moment, neither of them said anything. You asked for help, he finally said. Audrey didn't look up. I shouldn't have. But you did. She turned her head then and took him in, the tattoos, the stillness, the eyes, and Audrey, who had spent the whole day being made small, lifted her chin. Let's get one thing straight, she said. I don't need saving. And Gi-ha, the most feared man in the city, did something that surprised even him. He almost smiled. I didn't say you did, he said. And that was it. That was the whole beginning. Not a rescue. A recognition. One person who'd been fighting alone their whole life, looking at another one, and finally seeing themselves. Tell me what's happening, Gi-ha said. From the start. Leave nothing out. So she did. The window, the envelope, the money, the apartment, the rope, cut clean on one side. Halfway through, she stopped and shook her head. Why am I even telling you this? I don't know you. You could be anybody. I could be, Gi-ha agreed. But you already sent the text, so somewhere in you, you'd already decided I was safe. I'm just catching up to your gut. Audrey let out a breath that was almost a laugh. My gut's got a bad track record. My gut married Jack. Your gut also kept a stranger's business card for 6 weeks, he said. And climbed back up a rope that should have killed you. I'd trust that gut. She looked at him a beat longer than she meant to. Then she kept going. Gi-ha listened to all of it without moving. And when she got to the rope, something in those dangerous eyes went very, very cold. You still have the harness? He asked. They took it. Building said it was protocol. Of course they did. He stood. Go home, Ms. Vance. Sleep if you can. Don't touch your husband's things. Don't tip your hand. Don't sign anything. He paused at the door. And check on that rope report. I have a feeling it's already disappeared. Who are you? He looked back at her. And for a second, just a second, the dangerous man looked almost gentle. Someone who knows what it's like to be worth more dead than alive to the people who are supposed to love you, he said. Get some rest. And he was gone. Over the next 2 days, Gi-ha's people took Audrey's life apart. and put it back together in a folder. Everything checked out. The affair, the theft, the apartment. All of it uglier in documents than it had even been in her fear. But it was one of his men, quiet, careful, who set a single photograph on the table in front of Gi-ha and changed everything. Boss, this came up when we ran the harness supplier. It's nothing to do with the case, but you should see it. It wasn't the case. It was older. 11 years older, a grainy photo from a rainy night. A wrecked car on a black road, headlights smashed, and a figure kneeling in the downpour beside a young man pulled halfway out of the driver's seat. Gi-ha went still, because he knew that road. He'd nearly died on that road. 11 years ago, a nobody kid with nothing to his name, run off the highway on a rainy night, pinned and bleeding and sure he was done, until a pair of hands he never saw the face of pulled him out of the wreck and held his head and kept him talking until the sirens came. He'd spent 11 years wondering who she was. He remembered exactly 2 things about her. Her voice, telling him stay with me, you don't get to quit tonight. And a flash of silver on her wrist. A thin silver bracelet, catching the ambulance lights, as she stood up and disappeared into the rain before anyone could get her name. Gi-ha pulled the photo closer, zoomed until it blurred. And there, on the wrist of the kneeling figure, a thin band of silver. His mind went, unbidden, to a plastic hospital chair. To a tired woman in a good dress who told him she didn't need saving. To the thin silver bracelet on her wrist. The one she never took off. It's her, he said, so quiet his man almost missed it. It was her, the whole time. Boss? Gi-ha sat back. For 11 years he had built an empire, feared and untouchable, and told himself he'd stopped looking for the woman from the rain. And she'd been across the city the entire time, starving herself to save a child, married to a man draining her dry, cleaning the windows of buildings he owned pieces of. The woman who once saved his life was, at this very moment, being destroyed by everyone she'd ever given hers to. Don't tell her, Gi-ha said. Not yet. Sir? She doesn't get to think I'm helping her because I owe her. He stood, and there was something new in him now, something the fear had always covered up. She's going to know I chose her because she deserved it. The rest comes after. And here's how Gi-ha courted a woman who'd told him she didn't need saving. He didn't court her at all. Not yet, he protected her, quietly, in ways she almost didn't catch. The building where she cleaned windows suddenly upgraded all its safety equipment. Brand new lines, redundant harnesses, a full inspection. Audrey assumed it was the lawsuit she'd threatened. It wasn't. A man she never noticed started sitting in the hospital lobby during Nia's appointments, reading the same newspaper, leaving when Audrey left. And one morning, Reggie told her, baffled, that the contractor who'd forgotten to file her rope report had been fired overnight. No explanation given. Little things, doors that locked behind her. Shadows that turned out to be on her side. Audrey felt the change without being able to name it. For the first time in years, the world felt less like it was trying to swallow her. She just didn't know yet that a man with dangerous eyes had quietly stepped between her and the dark, and had no intention of letting her thank him for it. Because that's the difference between a man who takes and a man who protects. One needs you to see everything he does for you. The other just does it, and lets you keep your pride. What Gi-ha uncovered next turned his stomach, and he did not have a squeamish stomach. Jack's plan wasn't just an affair. It was an exit, a clean, cold, calculated exit, and Audrey was the mess he intended to leave behind. The pieces fit together like a con because that's what it was. Drain the treatment account. Move the assets into accounts Audrey couldn't see, some in Delilah's name. Push Audrey toward a divorce while she was too exhausted to fight. Get her to sign away what little was left. Paint her as unstable. She's always been emotional, always struggling, and walk away with everything. And Audrey? Audrey would be left holding a mountain of hospital debt and a daughter who still needed medicine. The rope, Gi-ha's people couldn't prove. Not yet. But the maintenance log had a gap. And the insurance policy on Audrey's life had been quietly increased 4 months ago. By Jack. The divorce papers landed the next morning. Jack didn't even hand them to her himself. He left them on the counter, next to the coffee maker, like a bill. Audrey found them. She stood there reading, and Jack came in knotting his tie, and he had the nerve, to sigh. You're making this harder than it has to be, he said. Audrey set the papers down. You took the money for our daughter's treatment. I was going to replace it. When, Jack? Her voice was flat and terrible and calm. When were you going to replace it? Before her next dose? Or after? He said nothing. Were you going to replace it before you left? or after? Before I found out about the apartment, or after? Before the rope, or after? His head came up at that, just slightly, and in that flinch, Audrey saw that he knew exactly what she meant, and that was worse than any confession. "You've lost it," he said, but his voice had gone thin. "You need help, Audrey. You're not well." "No," she said. "For the first time in a long time, I'm seeing perfectly." Here's the part nobody talks about, though. After Jack left for work that morning, Audrey sat alone at the kitchen table with the divorce papers in front of her, and she picked up her phone and started dialing him. Not to beg. Not exactly. Just some old, worn groove in her brain that had spent 9 years reaching for Jack whenever the world got scary. Her thumb was already on his name before she caught herself. She set the phone down, slowly, both hands flat on the table. "He is the scary thing," she said out loud to the empty kitchen. "You don't call the fire to put out the fire. That's what healing actually looks like. Not a triumphant speech. A woman alone at a table, catching her own hand, and choosing, one more time, the hard way, not to go back." 2 weeks later, the invitation came. Cream cardstock, gold lettering. Jack and Delilah were celebrating their engagement, and Audrey was invited. Reggie nearly lost his mind when she told him, "You're not going. Tell me you're not going." "Audrey, that is a trap. That is a supervillain move." "I'm going." "Why?" "Because Jack wanted her broken in a ballroom. He wanted her to show up small and shaking so everyone could watch the sad first wife crumble, while the beautiful new couple glittered. And Audrey had decided she was done giving that man the show he wanted. She wore a simple dress, dark, elegant, no logo, no sparkle, no jewelry except the thin silver bracelet she never took off. Her braids down, those long coiled rosettes catching the light. She walked into that ballroom looking like a woman who had somewhere better to be, and heads turned, and Audrey did not so much as blink. Delilah found her first, gliding over in champagne silk. "You came," a little laugh. "Honestly, I wasn't sure you would." "I was invited," Audrey said. "It'd be rude not to congratulate the happy couple." Delilah's smile flickered. Then someone tapped a glass, and Jack stepped up to say a few words, glowing, an arm around Delilah's waist. "Thank you all for being here," he said. "This has been... Look, it's been a hard year. Endings are hard. But sometimes you have to close one door to open a better one. Delilah and I are starting a new life. And I want to say..." His eyes found Audrey across the room, and he smiled. "I really do hope Audrey finds someone someday. Somebody who can, take care of her." And people laughed. Soft, cruel, country club laughter. Audrey stood alone in the middle of it. Her hands, at her sides, trembled once, then went still. Because behind her, the ballroom doors opened. No announcement, no entourage, no fanfare. Just one man, in a dark jacket over an olive tee, tattoos at his wrists, walking in like the room had been waiting for him, and just hadn't known it. The laughter died in stages, table by table, as people who knew exactly who he was went silent and gripped their partner's arms. That's not, what is he doing here?" Geha didn't look at any of them. He looked at Audrey, then at Jack, then at Delilah, and in a voice that didn't need to be loud to fill the entire room, he said, "She already did." Silence. Absolute, total, glorious silence. Jack blinked. I'm sorry, who?" "Someone who can take care of her," Geha said, walking forward slowly. "You said you hoped she'd find one. She already did. Weeks ago. The night you sat her at a table so you could laugh at her. Now, here's where a lesser man would just flash a bank balance. Say something like, 'I could buy this building.' Predictable. Cheap." Geha did something far worse to Jack. He told the truth. In front of everyone. "Before you toast the happy couple," Geha said to the room, unhurried, "you should know what you're toasting." He nodded, and one of his men moved through the crowd, quietly handing a folder to a few of the most important guests. "The groom has spent the last several months moving money out of an account labeled, and I want to be precise here, NIA'S Treatment Fund. That's his 7-year-old daughter. The money was for her medicine." A murmur went through the room like a cold draft. "He used it," Geha went on, "for that apartment on Hartwell. The car. This party, actually. You're drinking his daughter's medicine right now." Delilah's champagne glass lowered an inch. "There are hidden accounts. Some in your name, Ms. Song." Geha's eyes flicked to Delilah, mild as anything, which was somehow the most frightening part. "There's a life insurance policy on his wife that he increased 4 months ago, and there's a maintenance log, at a certain building, with a very interesting gap in it, on the exact morning her safety line failed. The room wasn't murmuring anymore. The room was staring. "You can't prove," Jack started. "I don't have to prove anything tonight," Jiha said. "I just have to say it out loud, in front of the only people whose opinion you've ever actually cared about. The rest, a small, terrible pause, takes care of itself." And then the last piece. Jiha lifted a hand, and from his phone, quietly, a recording played. Jack's own voice, unmistakable, captured in some careless moment. "I'm never actually putting that money back. She'll believe whatever I tell her. She always does. She always does." The whole room heard it. Jack's boss heard it. Jack's friends heard it. The people whose respect he'd sold his family for, they heard it. And one by one, they turned away from him. Delilah turned too, but not away, toward Jack. "The accounts," she said, her voice suddenly very tight. "In my name. I just tried to. My card just declined at the bar, Jack." "Why did my card decline?" "They've been frozen," Jiha said helpfully. "About 20 minutes ago." Delilah's beautiful face went white. She rounded on Jack. "You said you had money. You promised me you had money." Jack, cornered, panicking, said the only true thing he'd said all night. "I did." And Delilah laughed. A short, ugly, disbelieving laugh. "No," she said. "You didn't." "She did." And she pointed one manicured finger across the room at Audrey. "She had it. You just spent it." The most beautiful reversal in the world. The woman he threw away wasn't the one who had nothing. She was the one who'd built everything. And here's where the story turns, and where I need you to stay with me, because it doesn't end the way you think. Audrey didn't cheer. She didn't gloat. She didn't throw a drink in Jack's face, though the whole internet would have framed it. She just walked out, past the frozen guests, past her destroyed husband, past the woman in the champagne dress, out the ballroom doors, down the steps, into the cool night air, and there, finally, alone, with no daughter watching and no rope to climb, and no lie left to tell, Audrey Vance let herself cry. Not pretty, not quiet, the real kind, the kind that folds you in half. And here's the thing. She wasn't crying because she wanted Jack back. She wasn't crying because he'd won, because he hadn't. She was crying for the boy she'd paid exam fees for the man who'd held her face and made a promise, for 9 years, and 1 gold ring, and a version of her life that had never actually existed. She was grieving a marriage that turned out to be a room with no one in it. Jiha came out after her, but he didn't touch her. He stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, and let her have it, the way you let someone have a thing that's theirs. "I gave him everything," she finally said, to the dark. "I know. I sold my grandmother's ring. I skipped meals. I climbed 60 floors with a bad shoulder because we needed the money." She wiped her face. And it still wasn't enough. Jiha was quiet a moment. "It was never going to be enough," he said. "Not because you didn't give enough. Because he only knew how to take. You can't fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom, Audrey. You just lose everything you pour, and start thinking the problem is you." Audrey turned and looked at him. Really looked. And for the first time in this whole story, the first time in a very long time, she smiled. Not a big one, not a movie kiss. Just a small, tired, real smile. The kind that tells you a person is going to be okay. Not today, but someday. And someday was more than she'd had in a long, long time. As Audrey turned to go find her car, Jiha's eyes dropped, just for a second, to her wrist. To the thin silver bracelet catching the streetlight, and without thinking, his own hand moved to his own wrist, to a faded scar there, 11 years old, from a rainy night on a black road. Audrey thought that ballroom was the first time Yom Jiha ever chose her. Pause. It wasn't. 11 years ago, before she knew his name, before she knew he was feared across this whole city, before any of it, a young woman with a silver bracelet knelt in the pouring rain and pulled a dying stranger out of a wrecked car. She held his head. She told him he didn't get to quit that night, and then she vanished before he could ask her name. He looked for her for 11 years, and she was cleaning his windows the whole time. A few weeks later, Nia got her treatment. The full course, every dose, paid. Audrey never fully got the story on how the hospital debt resolved itself, and every time she pushed, a very polite billing office told her the account was settled and changed the subject. Audrey still worked. She still woke at 5. Some habits are stitched too deep to pull out, and honestly, she liked the quiet. And she liked the wind 60 floors up that told her, "Keep going, girl." But she wasn't climbing to survive anymore. She was climbing because it was hers. And she still caught herself, sometimes, reaching for her phone to check an account that wasn't empty anymore. Still flinched, some mornings, at the sound of a key in a door. Still had to remind herself, once in a while, that she didn't have to make anyone's lunch but her own and Nia's. Healing isn't a light switch. It's a sunrise. It comes slow, and it comes anyway. One evening she came home to find a small package outside her door. No name, no stamp. She opened it on the kitchen floor with Nia peering over her shoulder. Inside, a bracelet. Thin, silver, new. The old one had gone thin and soft with 11 years of wear, and here was its twin, bright and whole. And a note, in careful handwriting. You once saved a stranger's life in the rain and never stayed to be thanked. Let me spend the rest of mine making sure you never have to fight alone again, G. Audrey read it twice. 3 times. Her hand came up to her mouth. Mommy, Nia whispered. Who's it from? Audrey stood. Walked to the door, looked down the long hallway, and at the far end, by the elevator, hands in his pockets, was Giha. Waiting. Not coming closer. Just there. The way he'd been there since the beginning. Present. Patient. Choosing her. Out loud. On her own terms. Audrey lifted her hand. A small wave. Giha smiled. A real one, the kind almost nobody in the city had ever seen. He smiled back, and the elevator doors slid closed between them. Not an ending. A beginning, held 1 floor away, for whenever she was ready to reach for it. Audrey Vance thought she lost her husband the day she saw him through that glass. She didn't. She lost the man who was never worthy of her, and without knowing it, without asking for it, she finally found the one who'd been searching for her for 11 years. The woman the whole world walked past. The woman they called invisible. Turns out she was the most important person in the room the entire time. They just needed the glass to clear. So that's Audrey. The window cleaner they laughed at. The wife they wrote off. The stranger in the rain who saved a life and never stayed to be thanked. Here's what I need you to actually take with you tonight. Not the mafia boss part. The real part. Audrey didn't get her life back because a powerful man showed up. She got it back because on the worst day of her life, dangling off a rope with her heart in pieces, she was still the kind of woman who'd kneel in the rain for a stranger. That was always in her. The money in the ballroom didn't make her worthy. She was worthy in the laundry room, on the floor, putting her ring back on so her little girl wouldn't see her cry. If somebody's got you feeling invisible right now, like a chapter they're done reading, like a bucket they can pour out and walk away from, I need you to remember Audrey. Remember that the people who empty you out are telling you something about them, not about you. And remember that you were never as alone, or as small, as they needed you to feel. If this story got you, comment, "The glass cleared," so I know you made it all the way to the end. And tell me, have you ever had somebody show you who they really were, and been shocked, then realized deep down you'd known for a while? I read every single one. Subscribe if you're new, because the next story is even bigger. And this week, go be somebody's stranger in the rain. I'll see you in the next one.